Good afternoon, and welcome to Cyversity Engage webinar. Today's topic is on resume writing and the art of the interview. Our Cyversity Engage program is designed to grow, develop, and highlight careers, opportunities, and contributions of diverse talent within cybersecurity. Some of the topic areas covered are career development, career spotlight, transitions, leadership talk, as well as technology talks. The Engage program also includes diversity highlights. Some you'll find listed here. So today for our agenda, first I'd like to welcome our attendees. I'll introduce our panel moderator for today, followed by the discussion and presentation. Afterwards, we'll have a QA session in which you get to engage and ask the panel questions. So please post your questions in the QA box to be addressed during that time. After that, we'll provide you with information on Cyversity memberships and its benefits, have a few announcements for you, as well as upcoming Engage webinars. And lastly, communicate with us via the Slack channel or email us at atlanta@cyversity.org. Also today, you'll be presented with a survey. We ask that you complete that to provide us with feedback on today's discussion. And also, this webinar is being recorded. So if you would like to access it, to review it again, it will be on the website under on-demand resources. So now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our panel moderator today, who is Lloyd Burney, the Talent Acquisition Manager for Warner Brothers Discovery. Lloyd, thank you so much, and the panelists for being here today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Cassandra, for that welcome. And I would just like to say welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you happen to be in. I certainly have learned that being a part of a global team is so important to make sure that you respect those time zones. So I just want to be respectful of that. So thank you so much for joining us. As Cassandra mentioned, I am a manager of talent acquisition for Warner Brothers Discovery. My client groups that I support primarily are the Cybersecurity Office, Enterprise Data, and then also Warner Brothers Studio Research Data Science team as well. And so I wanted to just, again, welcome you. And one of my colleagues is going to drop into the chat box a link to join our talent community. We like to try to invite people to join our talent communities. That way, you know, whenever there are positions that are open and available, you will already be in our pipeline, and we can reach out and touch you as quickly as possibly as we can. So that, again, that link is just there in the chat box. Feel free to click that link and join our talent community. So now I would like to turn it over to my colleagues for them to introduce themselves and tell you which groups that they support. So we'll start off with John, because you're at the top of my screen.
Sounds good. My name is John Lloyd, and I'm the Technical Sourcing Manager for HBO Max Engineering. So my team handles all of the technical roles in terms of sourcing and finding qualified candidates for the HBO Max team. And that includes software engineering, as well as right now product and data as well. And excited to be here and help out on the panel.
Thank you, John. And then I'll kick it over to Annie, my BFF.
Hi, my work wife. Happy to be here as well and work through some of the resume tips we have for you. I'm Annie Scagel. I'm a TA manager as well, and I support hiring for direct to consumer, which is our HBO Max product, and then soon to be Discovery Plus product combining together. And I support the content, brand, creative, and design across Warner Brothers Discovery.
Thank you, Annie. And then I will next go to Anna, who was like my CNN cul-de-sac mate, because we sit on the same floor and the same aisle.
Thank you, Joy. I'm happy to be here. My name is Anna Johnson. I'm a senior recruiter for news and sports at Warner Brothers Discovery. So I support CNN, Bleacher Report, and Turner Sports. On the editorial side, so all the writers, the producers, the people that are in the newsroom. And then I personally support a lot of digital roles within that. So yeah, so that's what I do.
Thank you, Anna. And she has two adorable little boys that I just recently seen. I can't believe how big they are, as well as Annie has now two kids, a little boy and a little girl, and they're adorable as well. So now I'd like to kick it over to Satara. Satara, have you just made like your 1 year with Warner Brother Discovery, is that correct?
I did a few weeks ago, so excited. It's a great company to work with, and I've enjoyed working with all of you. So Satara King, as mentioned, I'm a senior recruiter. My focus is mainly finance and accounting. That's across corporate as well as our production. So runs the gamut of all of our different production units that we have, as well as GRE, which would be our global real estate teams, some studio operations, really just a utility player across the board. So I look forward to speaking with all of you, and I'm giving you some tips about the interview process. Thank you, Joy.
Wonderful. So now you guys have had an opportunity to meet some of my amazing colleagues. And so you probably have already been able to just tell just a little bit by why I selected them to present to you today. Because we will have a Q&A at the end of the conversation and not during, please feel free at any given time that you think of a question that you want to be answered. Don't hesitate to put it in the Q&A box, and we will definitely get to that at the end of our presentation. So I am now going to share my screen. I'm sorry, Cassandra, could you stop sharing your screen, I think? Okay. Our face is down. All right. So give me a thumbs up that everyone can see my screen, or I shouldn't say just tell me, because I actually can't see the panel anymore.
We can see it.
Okay, great. All right, so moving on. So what our focus today is going to be on, we'll be talking about, well, we've already made our introductions. So we'll be talking about resume tips, social and digital footprints, and then interviewing to win, and then network. And so I feel that even though definitely this presentation can be good for all levels of your professional careers, because there's going to be probably some little nuggets that maybe you haven't heard before, or definitely some good reminders. So definitely make sure that you have your thinking caps on and your listening ears. All right. So when you think about just even preparing yourself before you start writing your resume, it's good to start even just getting mentally prepared for that. Thinking about what should be, as you start to build the roadmap for your next career move, here's a couple of things that you want to kind of like keep in mind, because it can mean different things. Sometimes whenever people are thinking about their next career move, they're thinking about what's the next level up. But really, you should be thinking about something more than that as well. Be thinking about, are there any rotational opportunities for you? Are there any lateral moves that you can make across your discipline or across your organization for a different type of experience that you can just add to your tool belt? And when you start thinking about your search or building your search for your next career move, think about having a clear understanding of what your skills are and your experience level. Narrow down what are the specific either divisions or departments or even other companies that you would want to target, and be strategic. I can't say that enough, but definitely make sure that you be strategic. And if you were called upon, how would you, how invested are you in that particular department or group, or even that company that you would want to move over to? Just think about how important that is to you, and then what would be your strategy in terms of approaching that company. And then as you start to build your resume, you want to tailor your resume, obviously, to highlight your transferable skills, especially if you're moving into an area that you are not currently working in, or that you currently do not have a lot of experience in. But regardless, when you think about your resume, this is how I normally do my resume, and I've done this now for several years, and it always seems to help me, is to make sure that I have like a foundational resume where it has kind of like everything on there, and I've just kind of like added to it over the years. because that's helpful because, no one wants to like update their resumes. Let's just be honest about that. So what we can do in order to make that least as painful as possible is just to have that foundational resume. And then once you're getting ready to apply for a position, figure out what are the adjustments or the changes or the new things that you need to add to your resume so it doesn't feel like it's such a daunting task. But you want to make sure that you include keywords and skills to highlight your skills that are specific to the job description. Definitely make sure that you're looking at the job description, looking if there's any like keywords in there that stand out that you think that a recruiter or a hiring manager are going to be looking for. Because let's just face it, for some of the jobs that we have, maybe not necessarily completely in cybersecurity, but for a lot of the jobs that we apply for, there's lots of people that are vying for those jobs. And so sometimes what recruiters have to do is they go in and they do a keyword search. And so usually some of those keyword searches will be found in that job description. So that's why it's so important that your resume truthfully can reflect that of the resume. So definitely make sure that also if there's any workshops that you have attended through your company. I know that at Warner Bros. Discovery, we have a really robust, opportunity for learning workshops. And so definitely make sure that you not only take advantage of those, but that you include those on your resumes as well. All right, so moving on to the next slide.
I think that's my cue. Is that me? Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some steps to take before you write your resume. So should you leave off an irreverent short-term job? Well, that depends. Can you turn your accomplishments to numbers? And what do I mean by that? For example, did you have budget responsibilities? Were you managing a $2.3 billion budget? How many clients did you juggle? 1, 2, 25? Another thing that you should consider is identifying your strengths. So what skills do you possess that keep popping up job after job? Those are going to be your strongest assets. So make sure to highlight them in your resume by placing them directly under your job title. Now, when it comes to writing out your description of each skill, accomplishments, this is where a lot of people get stuck and they agonize over it. They start wondering, should they write full sentences, use bullet points, an arrow? And I'm going to say, or use a period at the end of each line. And I'm going to say that the most important thing is to be consistent. So whatever you decide to do, you need to be consistent with that. Also, don't write paragraphs. Recruiters want to be able to glance at your resume and get the gist of it. So don't make the recruiter guess what your actual job was. So you want to put your titles in bold. And you want to translate strange titles into descriptive ones. So for example, community rockstar should be community rockstar public relations. And then lastly, 1 to 2 pages is generally an acceptable length. Okay, so first of all, you don't need an objective. We know that your objective is to find a job. Secondly, as you're making bullet points under each position, you want to list more for your most recent role. And then also, you should add the month and the year to your positions and keep it chronological. And then, of course, you don't want to forget any skills, whether you have Photoshop skills, Tableau, whatever makes sense in your field of work, you definitely want to include those. And then lastly, the famous cover letter. This could be a little bit controversial. Some recruiters will say you absolutely need to have one. Others will say you don't need to have one. I'm going to go with it's your call, but if you do decide to use it, make sure that it's purposeful. Make sure that you're not just listing off the same information that you have on your resume. If you're going to include a cover letter, make sure that you're including something of value, so that people will want to take a look at it and read it.
I think it's just like actually such a great point, Anna, because you're very right. Any given recruiter that you speak to will have a different viewpoint about that. And so it definitely makes sure that you're relevant. It's so funny. I think all of us here collected today, we have the same feeling about cover letters, but usually that's not always the case. Some of my other colleagues feel the other way, but I just feel like they're just really not necessary unless you have a specific reason. So whenever you do those cover letters, make sure that you're being very strategic about those, and there has to be a purpose or a reason to those. And I just definitely want to make sure that I underline that, because that is a little bit controversial, and that is like one of those questions that we get all the time. Anytime we do an event, we always get that question about cover letters. Okay, so next one. Oh, and let me just also say too, is I wanted to go back and just reiterate what Anna said about the objective. Please understand that if you have an objective on your resume, that really is kind of like old school and it's kind of like outdated. We know that you want a job, so it's not really necessary for you to tell us that. So now it's more about the summary of your skills. So keep that in mind as you approach updating your resumes.
I did want to piggyback off of the cover letters because
Absolutely.
yes, it is a controversial thing. And in my area, which was content and creative, a lot of times for certain roles, we do not require that. But for things like journalism, writing, copywriting, if you have any friends who are in those areas of work, sometimes our hiring managers like to see those types of cover letters for those types of roles, because it gets a feel for how you write and if you're going to be a fit for a role. But I would say that's the exception to the rule of cover letters.
Thanks, Anna.
I'll chime in as well. As Joyce said, we all have our individual reasons for why they're important or not. For me specifically, if I'm usually using them if something is quite not clear. So if you are applying for a role that's not within the state, or if you're applying for a role that is a career change for you, that's when I would go to your cover letter to understand, are you already considering relocating, and what's the reason for a career change? That's just two examples. But if I need to dig in and find out a little bit more, that I would then go to the cover letter to look for that. And that's also could be included in an objective as well. But like everyone else has said, just make it purposeful.
Right. And the other part, I think that a lot of people probably use that area, like if they've had any gaps within their work history and they want to explain that definitely is a perfect opportunity to use a cover letter to try to explain what those gaps in employment have been. John, I see you come off of mute. You want to chime in too?
I was going to say, just to kind of round out the cover letter discussion. So for me, especially with my team, we're reaching out to candidates probably without a cover letter. So we'll see your LinkedIn profile or your resume somewhere, and we're going to reach out based off of that. And even if you apply to a role in the ATS, more than likely, we're going to look at your resume first. And then, like they mentioned, we may come back around to the cover letter if everything else looks good. So for me, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of cover letters, but I think in those cases, it makes sense. Also, if you don't know the person directly, so let's say you reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, you might send them your resume and a cover letter or something like that. That kind of makes sense to me because you kind of giving the whole picture. But outside of that, I would say spend more time on your resume than your cover letter.
Absolutely. I think that's a good way to put that. But John referenced ATS in his comment, and ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. So whenever someone applies to our website, it comes into like our internal system, which is our Applicant Tracking System, or ATS. So that's also good to keep in mind. And I think it's good that John kind of like chimed in there because his team are sourcers. And just to make a distinction between that, you can have someone who is a full life cycle recruiter, meaning that they do everything from soup to nuts. They may post the job. They're going to be looking through for the applicants and searching for them. They phone screen the applicant or have the interview with them. They set up the interview with the hiring manager. They go through walk the candidate through the interview process, and then in the end, hopefully they will extend them an offer, and hopefully the candidate will accept. But we also have another model that we use at Warner Brothers Discovery is for the recruiter to be more so like the account manager, providing consulting, consulting skills and conversations to the hiring manager, but also interacting with the candidates. But then we also work very much so hand in hand with our sourcing colleagues, and they are the ones who are going out and searching for those candidates that maybe we potentially could not just find those people who had applied through our website. So I thought that was good insight that you added there, John. All right, so moving on to the next slide. There we go. Oops, let me go back. I think that's you, Annie. I think that you're up next.
Sorry, my mute button is finicky. All right, so as we just talked about, sometimes you need a foundational resume, and then one thing to point out, generic resumes sometimes do not work. You want to stand out from the piles of applicants, hundreds of applicants sometimes. And so here are some tips. So design matters. Don't go overboard with intricate decorated templates, but look for sufficient white space. Margins of at least 0.7 and a font size no smaller than 11. 11 is definitely my lowest I can read. And one of the fonts I like to recommend is Georgia. It actually is condensed in a way where you can get more on a page because of the size of it and the pieces of it. So I would recommend looking at Georgia. Be reachable, huge. Make it easy for recruiters and hiring managers to reach out to you. Provide your contact info in the header, phone number, email address, and then LinkedIn profile. I sometimes have the LinkedIn profile. I see it sometimes in the contact information, but I actually have mine in my footer of my page for myself. And address is optional now. We used to have addresses on. Now it's definitely an optional thing to put on there because sometimes it can deter from hiring managers looking at you. Like if you are looking for a relocation and somebody sees that you live in Florida, but you want to be in Georgia, you don't want to put that on there sometimes because you just want to make sure that they contact you and then you can explain in a conversation with them that you're looking to move. Maybe you have a date of moving, just easier the better. And then show off your skills. So don't make recruiters hunt for the most critical information on your resume. Include a table of your key soft and hard skills up at the top, and make sure that you highlight your skills and why you're good for the job fit. All the better if these keywords are from the job description, and then provide a link to your portfolio website or GitHub if you have those and it's appropriate to the field or job. And list your experience. This section should include each company you've worked for, your title, the dates, and when you've worked. Several bullet points that describe your key accomplishments and responsibilities. Bullet points versus paragraphs are a much easier read for hiring teams. You don't want to make us hunt for relevant skills or experience. Quantify your experience. Whenever you can, use concrete data points. It'll help provide recruiters with the scope and context of your work and demonstrates how you've contributed to successes. Include other positions. Don't be afraid to include positions that are directly related to the ones you're applying for, especially if you have limited work experience. You can still use it to demonstrate the skills and qualities you want to get highlighted. Get the grade. Many job required degrees or certificates to make sure you list yours. GPA is optional, but it may be worth including if you've graduated with high marks. The extra stuff. You can add some color to your resume with some catch-all additional experience section at the end. This can include clubs, organizations, volunteer experience, awards you've won, hobbies, activities. A lot of times this makes you look like a well-rounded person outside of work. And a lot of times we do look at that as an individual. Keep it concise. Limit to 1 to 2 pages at the most. Be brief and concise. And when in doubt, ask yourself, is this relevant? This happens a lot with some of my entry level types of grads. Sometimes I have a section that I call early career, where I have them list internships or maybe additional work experience. And I keep a whole subsection of that for people who are maybe Maybe they work during college as a server or an organization or volunteers. This can be really helpful too, again, because we like to look at the well-rounded person sometimes, especially when you're entry level and don't have all the experience. And then use proper English as well. Using unnecessarily big words doesn't make you sound more intelligent. It can actually negate you from real experience. So what's another way to utilize, here's a specific example, utilize innovative social media technique to boost readership and engagement among core demographic. Here's another way to put it in like a return on investment. So it would be posted on Twitter 3 times a day and brought a follower account from 1,000 to 3,000. Numbers, data, always helpful for people to see the relevancy instead of just saying it more generic. And then proofread. Ask at least 3 people to look over your resume. I swear it's so true. One person won't catch something, another person will catch another. It's important to look through and have others critique as well. And then we talked a little bit about objective statements and references upon request. Also, objective statements not necessary, and references upon request. Also, you can take that out. And I know that's more of your old school type of resume. A lot of times in the interview process, if your hiring teams want references, they'll ask you for them. It's just going to take up space on your resume. All right, next slide.
And I would just say, before we move to the next
Yes.
slide, I would just simply say it's also very important to save your resumes as a PDF, and to, whenever you're applying for the position, whether you are applying to it through an applicant tracking system, you go to a career website for a company, or whether you are submitting your resume via LinkedIn, or whether you're submitting your resume via email to a recruiter or a hiring manager, or to even a friend that you're wanting them to pass your resume along, please make sure that you do it as a PDF and not as a Word document. That's definitely a good rule of thumb. And then I would also just add too, is that if you have a portfolio, or if you have a website, or if you have a GitHub that you want, because I can't remember if Annie said this or not, but sorry if I'm repeating, but if you have that, please make sure that you provide a link to that on your resume. And typically what I would recommend candidates do is have it up there on your title, or where your name and your information, your contact information is. Just go ahead and add that link up there as well.
That's important to me in my work with design. Specifically, we look more so, we glance at the resume, but we go to the work and we want to see the design and see if it's applicable to our brands. Okay, resumes, what's the skinny? Here's to do and not to do. Keep most of that relevant information up at the top. Mentioned earlier, match the job description with keywords. Sometimes we log in the most important things that this hiring manager is looking for. And so if it matches when we do a search for your resume, easy peasy. And then pay attention to margins, tense, and sentence structure. Huge with tense. You want to make sure that if you're in a present job, you use your present tense. Past. It's one thing that is very much overlooked. So this is why the proofreading, super important. And spend time with your resume and your thoughts. As it was mentioned earlier, sit down and really think about what you've done in each of these jobs and what you've contributed and on the ROI. That's the big piece, the return on investment of what you've output of your work has been. And then yes, proofread on paper. Yep, of course, got to do that. And then make a new resume for each position. So I have multiple resumes. So I have one that's more focused on the type of work that I've done in recruitment in different areas of the business. So it's very similar. So if you've worked in cybersecurity in one way versus the other, and guys, excuse my speak, I don't know the cyber reverse in tech, but if you've worked on something more so than the other, you can create one that really shows the ROI in different areas of the business and what you've done. And what not to do. Do not go over 2 pages. That's kind of our limit there. It gets a lot of repetitive type of speak after you go over 2 pages.
Well, I can interject right there, Annie, sorry. This is like another one of those like controversial areas too,
Yes.
just the cover letter, right?
Yes.
Because different recruiters will have different things to say, but I think for the most part, most of us would say, please don't go over 2 pages. I will never forget, I had this one person one time, they asked me this question, because this is yet another question that we always get whenever we're doing these types of events or having these types of webinars or workshops. And it's, how many pages should my resume be? And I just remember this person, I was telling them that we really shouldn't go over two pages. And the person said, well, I have years of experience and my resume is like 10 pages. So I'm going to use all of my relevant experience. But my challenge to them was, well, that's all good and fine, but not very many recruiters that I know, and certainly not hiring managers, have the time to go through 10 pages. I know that you feel very much so about, feel good about your experience and your skill set, but it should not be encompassed in 10 pages. No one is going to read that. So your rule of thumb should always be, is it relevant and is it concise? So if there's, so much extra jargon in there that you shouldn't need, make it as concise as possible, because really at the end of the day, hiring managers and recruiters, especially when they're doing their first pass, they're just skimming and they do not have time to skim over 2 pages. It just is what it is. And that's just being very, very honest with you. So save your 10 pages for your foundational resume. Keep your usable resume to at least 2 pages, if not less.
And with that, I know a lot of people, it's hard for people to forget that experience. So that's why I do say sometimes if you want to create a little subsection that says like early career or additional jobs, sometimes just list something out. Don't put the details and the bullets underneath it, but you can just list the company and title. I find that to be helpful for people who can't part with their ever long career. Relying on templates. Yes, that's a big one as well. Sometimes it just doesn't work out for you and what you want to do. So you always feel free to create your own or keep it simple. Misspelling, big one. I don't always ding my candidates for this, but it is one that can really get you past over, that's for sure. Reiteration, PDF is the way to go. Yes, let's make sure that we walk away. If there's one thing today, that's it. Do not lie. It will come back to bite you. This is so true. This one, we have all probably had some sort of experience where a candidate has lied about something and it's been uncovered, whether it's networking, whether it's hearing through the grapevine, or whether it's questioning the candidate themselves and feeling intuition that was not the proper answer or what actually played out. Do not use charts or go crazy with color. We just want to make an easy read. We just want to make it to be one of those simple things that just is not a little, and for me, this is hard to say because I work with designers who they do go crazy with color and they do have a lot of different types of branding on theirs. But I always say less is more.
Thank you, Annie. Okay, Satara.
Okay, so I'll be discussing your social footprint. And we have a saying, which is basically kind of, you want to tell your story, and your social footprint goes a long way in being able to tell that story. So from the beginning, you want to follow industry organizations like everybody has done already with Cyversity. So great job with that. And you also want to find influencers and other people in your industry and kind of reach out to them in a sense of following them, being around in those organizations so you can really be updated on what's going on. You can get new tips and tricks as they kind of come along. Also engage in discussions online. So feel comfortable going on different forums and speaking with people. I know GitHub is honestly a great resource because you can actually have those conversations and get hands-on work as well at the same time. So definitely be involved in those types of areas and discussions. I think is very important. Of course, everybody at this point, you have to have a LinkedIn profile. It's kind of like having a Facebook profile in your personal life. And that's really how you can get the attention of a lot of different recruiters. Even when you don't want it, sometimes we'll go out there and we'll find you. So definitely make sure you create a LinkedIn profile, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about that on the next slide. And also Google yourself. I actually did this and it was interesting. So John Lloyd is a very common name. I've seen everything from a tennis player to all sorts of people, lawyers and all sorts of stuff. But when I put John Lloyd Sorcerer, I was actually the first name that popped up in Google. So I felt good about that. It's like everybody knows my profile and they know what I do, which is great. So you think about when you Google yourself and kind of how you want to show your brand, you kind of want that to pop up when you do that as well. We go to the next slide, Joy. Okay, so in terms of LinkedIn tips, for example, use a professional email address. You know, I could put john.lloyd@gmail.com, and that sounds pretty good. That sounds like a good name. But if I put, you know, Jay-Z's #1 fan, that might sound a little bit different when I'm going to apply for these jobs. So you want to keep that in mind when you have the email address, have something that's nice and professional and makes it pretty simple.
Can I
Also,
jump in really quick too? Also, your
Yeah.
voicemail. I know this is a little off of the subject of LinkedIn tips, but make sure your voicemail is professional, whatever your message is, because those, I can't even think of what they're called anymore, those tones where there's music playing, or some people just get really creative and think that only their personal friends are going to be calling them. But if you're applying for a job, please update your voicemail greeting message.
That's a great point. And then also upload a professional image. So a professional image doesn't necessarily have to be a fancy headshot. If you see the first slide that we had earlier, I actually had just me and my wife were going to a wedding and I just cropped her out of the picture. And so you see my headshot with a shirt and tie. So, you know, you don't have to necessarily have a professional picture. I would like to update mine at some point to that. But just have a picture that really shows off who you are and make sure it's somewhat recent. I remember I gained a few pounds since I was in college when I first got my LinkedIn profile, and I looked completely different than that person. So I had to update my picture so everybody knew who I was talking to, who they were talking to when we move forward. So kind of keep that in mind as well. Make sure you complete the specialties and the interest sections. What's great about LinkedIn, you really get a full picture of somebody. So of course, we're going to look at the work experience, but we're going to look at everything outside of that too. So if you're really interested in your field, make sure you put those interests there. Even put in what you're interested in outside of the field. That's okay. This is really your chance to kind of show everything you are as a person. So you want to make sure you dig into that. And also along with that, it doesn't necessarily have to be your complete resume on LinkedIn, but you want to make sure you hit all the hot spots. So if you have any certifications, definitely make sure you put that on there. Do some bullets about your current job now and some of the key things that you're doing. So as a recruiter, when I go out to search for it, I can see in your skills sections, be like, okay, this person has their CISSP. And then you can look in the job and see where they dig into it and what they're doing there. And that really helps us out when we're searching profiles and trying to find candidates. Also show your presentations, reporting, portfolios. I think this is another place where GitHub would be a great resource. So you already had that repository of some work that you've done. And you can actually use your GitHub and put a link there so that you'll be able to see that as well. Of course, use proper English and grammar. We would like to do that on the LinkedIn profile. So when you're reading it, you can make sure that, you know, in terms of if you're working in an environment, you'll be able to be professional in that type of setting. And then keep it current with your skills list. So, you know, if you maybe say you worked on a skill the last time you touched it 15 years ago, are you really still comfortable with that skill? If not, maybe think about removing it. Because when we look at your profile, we see a skill there, we're going to think that you have really good experience with it and you can do it right away. So if you feel like you have to take a lot of time to ramp up, maybe not put that on there. But when you have a discussion with the source or recruiter, you can say, hey, I touched that skill a little while ago. It might take me a little time to ramp up, but I can get to it. And then remember, some companies only use LinkedIn to recruit. And the LinkedIn recruiter, basically every major company will have a LinkedIn recruiter seat. So it's good to have a great profile there just because you'll be able to get in touch with a lot of different recruiters. Some companies will go outside of that. Of course, you can apply to different jobs and things like that on your own, but not having a LinkedIn account or a really good LinkedIn profile can be really detrimental to your career in terms of having recruiters reach out to you and try and find people for the position.
Great. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Satara?
Yes. So I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted. That was a lot. And you haven't even made it to the interview stage, but here we are. So you followed all of those different tips and tricks that were given to you. And now, lo and behold, you had your telephone number or email or whatever on your resume, and somebody has reached out to you. So congratulations on that. That means that you've passed that first initial screen. A lot of times before you even get to the interview process, your resume has been seen by maybe a few people, definitely by the recruiter, possibly a sourcer, and then possibly the manager as well. So they've already seen what you could bring to
Uh-oh, Satara, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I don't know what I did. So,
Sounds good.
so you've made it to this point, and you're at the interview stage. There are three main types of interviews. You've got the phone interview. That's typically going to be possibly an initial screen with a recruiter. It could be a telephone conversation with a manager or someone on the team, but usually that's the first step. You'll want to ensure that you have a quiet place, that you have no distractions, whether it be in your car, in your house, or wherever you are to take that call, that you have you've blocked that time off so you're uninterrupted during that time. Bring a positive attitude. We can hear it in your voice. You know, a lot is portrayed through your projection in your voice. And just be prepared. This is a time, especially when you're on the phone, you're free to have as many notes in front of you as you want at this point in time, because no one sees what you're doing. So definitely have your resume there, have the job description in front of you. Just be prepared for that initial phone call. And this, I'll give you some tips that you could use for the phone call through the other interview processes as well. But I think that's the main thing, is be prepared. You also have video, which is probably one of the most used types of interviews during this particular time that we've been in. Some of our jobs we're conducting totally using video interviews. So the whole process from beginning to end will be not in person, but on video. And when that happens, it's important that you think about the atmosphere that you're providing when you're on that call. So professional appearance, that's you. How are you dressed for the role? I would dress as though you are interviewing for the company. So that comes in line with doing research about the company. Are they more casual? Kind of what's the dress code that the company has, or from what you view and the information that's online, what can you take from that as far as what that culture is like? Eye contact, that's hard. Sometimes practice that. Sometimes you don't know where to look. Your camera's at the top of your laptop usually, or on your phone. But practice looking at that camera. And it's okay if you look away. It's kind of creepy if you're just honed in on that camera and never break, but try to keep on eye contact as much as you can. Your surroundings, you don't see my background with my dogs. My coworkers have try to have, if you have a busy background like us, maybe use or platform that you're using. Now, kind of
Uh-oh, Satara,
quiet some of that noise
it looks like
that's
you're maybe coming in and
going
out.
on. Also, dogs, children, most of us understand that there's going to be some cute. Am I still? Hello? Hello? I'm gone?
Okay,
Yes?
that's better.
I'm so sorry. This has been happening on Zoom since we've transferred. So apologies. If it, you know, try to take some
Satara,
Still
we're having
got some
trouble again.
audio.
We're having trouble again. Maybe you could, are you able to take down maybe your virtual background? Maybe that's.
control over that can.
Okay.
Test your equipment. So usually you're sent a link prior to your interview. I'm just going to try to. Hello?
Okay.
No,
Keep going.
you can hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you
Yes.
better.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Test your equipment. You'll usually receive a link prior to your interview. So feel free to click on that link, and that should help you as far as being prepared. I also know I'm an advocate for all of my applicants. So if you want to reach out to me and, hey, we have a test, and I send you a link and we just test it out to make sure you can get on video, I can hear you, etc. I'm more than happy to do that for you as well. And then there's there's live and there's pre-recorded. So we also use a system called HireView, which we'll send you a link, and you go on there and there's some pre-record your answers. Usually you have a few chances to do that, and then you submit those answers. The other version is live, of course, and when you're going to be talking to someone face-to-face, virtually, and having the interview in that way. Person, so that's exciting. I was ask and understand what any COVID policies are, so that you're prepared for that before you go in. These can be a team or panel, which means there'll be several people from the team, comfort, and then you, and then there's you'll take turns answering and asking questions, or there can be rounds of interviews where you're having multiple first, second, third rounds of interviews, or interviews with different people on the team, and those would be more of a one-on-one. Okay, next slide.
Hi,
I'm
Joy.
gonna jump in. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. We are at 12:47. We have about 5 questions from participants today
Sure.
to ask the panel. I just want to make sure we have enough time to address the questions as well. So,
Again.
okay, thank
So
you.
we'll just kind of like maybe just run through those last 2 slides. So Tara, I'm gonna go ahead and just like jump in because we're having like really a lot of trouble.
Okay.
You're going back in and out, so I'm just gonna go ahead and take over.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Sure. So when it comes to the interview, make sure that you are approaching it just like you would your interview, that you're in it to win it. Know your stuff. Know not only what you should know and how to do your job that you're shooting for, but what you should also know in terms of like about that company, maybe even that particular department, and obviously that job that you are applying for. Think of smart ways to kind of like communicate whatever research that you've done about that particular company. And maybe it should just only be about, how it shouldn't just be about like how great that company is. Oh, I just love your company. That shouldn't be like the indication of the research that you've actually done on that particular position. Don't make sure that you do not speak negatively about your former company, because that really actually looks more bad on you than it does your actual company. And then I often say that, definitely make sure that you also bring your whole self, bring your authentic self, but definitely make sure that you're bringing your best self to that kind of conversation. I would also say that when it comes to questions for an interview, always make sure that you do have questions. Please do not leave that interview without asking questions to that hiring manager or the interview panel. Even if you have to write down a few questions, obviously there may be questions that are organically that may happen, but if you have to write down at least 3 to 5 questions and just be ready to ask those questions before the end of that conversation. When it comes to networking, network. But when you do network, make sure that you network with intention. Make sure that you leverage any relationships that you possibly have or any professional organization that you are a part of. We actually have business resource groups, so make sure that you leverage even those type of groups if you have those at your company. Make sure that as you are being intentional, that you are being respectful of people's time. When it comes to like figuring out a strategic approach to networking, maybe even create yourself a spreadsheet so that you can know who that you contacted, when you contacted them, what questions you asked, what was the outcome of that conversation, so that you can even nurture that relationship and follow back up with them whenever you need to. Take advantage of every opportunity that you have to network. Make sure that you think about your elevator speech and prepare that. And then again, be yourself, but be your best self. So with that, we will go to our Q&A. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here. And so I'm gonna go to the Q&A box. And a great job, Cassandra, on an esteemed panelist. Thank you. The question would be, would you say that these principles can be applied to any industry, not just cybersecurity? Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I thought it was just so important for us to do like a general, kind of like resume writing and interview tips, because it's just so important for anybody, no matter what discipline, no matter what field. And so Jay Brown is asking, are any of the roles remote? So, Warner Bros. Discovery is a is a global organization, and we have people that are, live all over the world. Right now, our current policy is for a hybrid work environment where people are coming to the office for 3 days a week, and then they work from home 2 days a week. However, we do have people that are still working 100% remote, just because they were hired in a 100% remote role, and they live maybe in an area that is not attached to a hub location. Like, say for instance, for like Legacy Warner Media, our hub locations were New York, LA, and Atlanta. And so there were other people, like in my team, I had someone who was in Chicago, and she wasn't really near any of our offices that were of significance. So she is 100% remote. So it just kind of really, at this point, it kind of depends upon the position, but I will say that our company policy is hybrid. So the next question is, what advice do you have for people who get nervous doing interviews? Does anybody from the panel want to answer that question? Satara?
I'll take that one because I was going to add that in my on my slides, but there's a wealth of information out there. All you have to do is Google. And you can, especially YouTube, there's so many videos of people having that back and forth and practicing interviews. And I would say, in order to not be nervous, it would take practice. Especially behavioral type interview questions. My recommendation for that is to think of 2 to 3 different either projects you've worked on, accomplishments you had, et-cetera, that you can pull your answers from. So it could be any question, whether it's about communication, how you work in a team, et-cetera. You have those 2 to 3 experiences in your tool belt, and you can answer any questions with those 2 to 3. So that should help you be a little bit more comfortable. I would also say be yourself. We're not looking for cookie cutter people to come in and be just like us. We want that diversity. So be yourself in the interview process, but ask a friend, talk to your dog, talk to anybody, practice your interview questions and answers and say them out loud. Also, notes. So as you're practicing and you think about the typical interview questions, and you can research all of that about what those typical interview questions are, jot down little notes. And it's okay to take a notebook with you, whether it be virtual or in person. You can have a notebook with you so that no one's expecting you to remember absolutely everything you've done in your life and your career. So have those notes and just be prepared. Those are the main things. I'm sure others have something to add, but I would just say that there is so much out there on the internet to help you get prepared for an interview.
Okay,
I was going to mention as well, sometimes I have had advise people to sit in a video interview and ask the questions back and record themselves, like pretend, so you can see how your eyes move, how you use your body language, and then review it. And then also it'll help with any nerves.
Got it. Which, mirroring, matching is always a good thing, just in conversation anyway, just even like with your own, personal in your personal life, but certainly professional, matching and mirroring is definitely one of those types of skills that you would want to master professionally and personally. So the next question is, this is a large question relating to social profiles. What would you say you look for as positive versus red flags in social profiles? Also, what social profiles would you expect candidates to be regularly using and have accounts on? Anyone on the panel like to answer this? John?
Yeah, so I think in terms of kind of social profiles, what we look for as like positives is, like I kind of mentioned before, looking to really tell that story. So I love to see progression in somebody's career. So let's say, you know, you started out as an intern or you started as an entry-level role, so you kind of got more experience and kind of grew throughout your career. Looking for the right skills that we're looking for. So depending on which role that we have, make sure that you have the right skills and things that we need for the position. And really just somebody who kind of takes your profile and kind of utilizes it in the right way in terms of, okay, this is what I can do career-wise. These are some things I have some interest in. This is my educational background. So you really get a good, clear picture. And I know my team, we're trying to find as many green flags as possible because we want to get as many people who, hired and kind of brought onto the team. I guess you could say some red flags and kind of the opposite is if you have a profile that's kind of incomplete, that kind of stands out too. So what I mean by incomplete profile is like, let's say you just have one job listed, you don't have all the information filled out. Sometimes you don't even have a picture. People look at that profile and probably skip past it because it's not even completely finished or completely done. So you want to make sure that you at least have like a good 80% of the profile filled out, so people can actually look at it and kind of figure out what's going on and what you're trying to do from that perspective.
Okay, so we're a little bit short on time, but I wanted to ask this other question. Another question, can generalized resumes not written towards every job a candidate applies to still be successful in your experience? If not, how far should a candidate go to ensure they tailor their resume to the application? Anyone want to take this question?
I would say generalized towards a certain career path or towards a certain role. So say, for instance, you're going to focus today on finance and accounting types of roles. I think it's okay to have a more generalized resume for that, but that you've done your research in the industry to understand what those keywords would be, you know, across the board. I still think if you're really looking to be a part of a specific company or a specific industry, it's better to tailor towards that.
Okay, and I thought that you may have a question, an answer, if you could do that briefly.
Oh, I was just going to say that it really depends on how much your current resume matches the job that you're applying to. So how much you tailor it will depend on how closely it matches the job description that you're looking at anyway. So I hope that makes sense. But, you know, I feel like the answer to that question kind of lies in what you already have in your resume and how closely that matches the current job description that you're looking to apply for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And before I turn it back over to Cassandra, I just wanted to remind anyone who maybe have joined us later in the session is that in the chat box, we do have a link to our talent community. So please make sure that you click on that link and join our talent community so you could be a part of our talent pipeline. And I'll kick it back over to you, Cassandra. And thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Joy, and thank you to everyone here today on the panel. Greatly appreciate it. It was great information provided to our attendees today. Wish we could carry the conversation on a little bit more, but we will respect the timing of the meeting for today. To the attendees, thank you so much for being here, and I would definitely get access to the link that Joy provided in the chat session. Also, you'll find in there a link to the survey to today's webinar. We do ask that you complete it and provide feedback on today's discussion. I'm very briefly going to go over Cyversity and some of our benefits. You do know that our mission is to achieve the consistent representation of women and underrepresented minorities within the cybersecurity space. And we do this by providing programs that are designed to diversify, educate, and empower. Moving on very briefly, here you'll see a few of the benefits of our program, where you can do career exploration by accessing Cyberseek, assess your skills using the competency core tool, and then develop your skills through Cyversity Engage events such as today, scholarship programs, training, and our mentorship program. We do have a cohort coming up and sometime in the September frame. So please be on the lookout for additional information there, and then network with us through our Slack channel and engaging and becoming a member of our local chapters. You can find more information on www.cyversity.org. Here again, a few things I recap, but we right now charge a nominal fee for student membership of $20, professional of $100. A few announcements. I post this in the chat box as well. Earlier this month, we had a webinar with ISC Squared, who is providing a training scholarship for their entry-level cybersecurity certified certification. And that application window has been extended and will be open until today, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You will find the link here as well as the chat box if you're interested in applying for that scholarship. We do have a ISACA Geek Week coming up. That conference is coming up August 8th through the 10th. They have provided Cyversity members with a discount code to attend in person. And then lastly, the B-Sides conference at Kennesaw State University will be coming up on August 27th. Tickets are free to the event and does include free lunch. The link to register for that is also in the chat box. And then lastly, please join us next month on August 24th for a discussion on a step towards continuous trust with continuous audit metrics. This event is sponsored by Cloud Security Alliance. So we ask that you join us there. Lastly, again, Joy and talent acquisition team at Warner Brothers Discovery, thank you again so much for being here today. And please excuse my raspy voice. I'm fighting off something. Thank you so much for joining us today. To our attendees, thank you as well. We do hope that you will join us again next month. And as I always say, remember to stay safe and stay connected. Thank you.
Thank you and goodbye.